In the endless expanse of the cosmos, where civilizations thrived on worlds bound by light years of separation, there was a planet named Rthis. Rthis was renowned for its crystalline cities and ethereal beings, the Rthis, whose beauty and grace were whispered about across galaxies. Their royal bloodline, said to be blessed by the cosmic winds themselves, produced heirs of unparalleled abilities. Empaths who could heal, warriors who could conquer, and scholars who could command the stars. But not Princess Ilara. Born frail and blind, Ilara had none of the traits the Rthis valued so deeply. Her translucent skin, shimmering faintly in the starlight, revealed her fragility. Her delicate, unseeing eyes could never channel the energy that flowed through her ancestors. Her voice was soft, her movements halting. To the Rthis, she was a shadow of what a royal should be, and for this, she was cast into a gilded isolation. Though her family adored her, they could not escape the pressure of their people's expectations. No suitor would take her hand, not for love, alliance, or even duty. Her people called her the untouched star, beautiful to behold but too distant, too flawed to be reached. And so, she remained confined to the palace gardens, her days blending into the monotony of existence. Until the humans arrived. The arrival of humans on Rthis was unexpected, though not unprecedented. In the wake of the Great Accord between the Milky Way and the Andromedan sectors, humans had become known for their ability to bridge divides between alien species. Curious and tenacious, they sought relationships, diplomatic and otherwise, across galaxies. Among the human delegation was a man named Jonah Cade. Unlike the polished ambassadors in their pristine uniforms, Jonah was an engineer, there to consult on energy systems for a new interstellar portal project. Jonah was unremarkable by human standards. He was of average height, with unkempt dark hair, calloused hands, and a penchant for staring too long at machines that hummed and buzzed. Yet, there was something about Jonah that drew people to him, a quiet warmth, a willingness to listen that made even the sternest alien dignitaries soften. It was during a stroll through the palace grounds that Jonah first saw her. She sat beneath a towering glimmerbloom tree, its luminous leaves casting soft shadows over her delicate frame. She was humming, a haunting melody that seemed to harmonize with the wind. Her fingers traced the petals of a flower, her head tilted as though listening to secrets carried by the breeze. Jonah approached hesitantly, unsure if he was intruding. "That's a beautiful tune," he said, his voice breaking the silence. Ilara turned her head sharply, startled. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Jonah Cade," he replied gently. "I'm one of the engineers working on the portal project. I didn't mean to startle you." "You're human," she said, her tone cautious but curious. "I've never spoken to one before." "And I've never spoken to a Rthian princess," Jonah admitted. "So I guess we're both having a first." Ilara's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Most don't speak to me at all, let alone humans." Jonah frowned. "Why not?" Her smile faded, and she turned her face away. "Because I am not what they want me to be." Jonah didn't press her, but he found himself drawn to her solitude. Over the following days, he sought her out, bringing small offerings, a flower that glowed in the dark, a trinket crafted by human hands, stories of Earth and its strange customs. Slowly, Ilara began to open up, her guarded demeanor giving way to something softer. She spoke of her dreams, her fears, and the weight of being a disappointment to her people. Jonah listened, never interrupting, never judging. And in time, he came to understand the depths of her loneliness and the quiet strength that lay beneath her fragile exterior. The court, however, was less understanding. Whispers began to spread of the human engineer who spent too much time with the princess. The nobles scoffed at the idea of a human, an unrefined, imperfect being, befriending a member of the royal family. When Jonah formally requested an audience with the king and queen to discuss Ilara, the court erupted in outrage. "You can't be serious," one noble exclaimed. "A human? And a mere engineer at that. He has no station, no wealth," another sneered. "This is an insult to our traditions." But Jonah stood his ground. "I may not have status or wealth," he said, his voice steady, "but I care for Ilara. I see her for who she is, not who she's supposed to be. If you'll allow it, I would like to bond with her, not for politics or alliance, but because I believe she deserves to be loved." The court was aghast, but the king and queen exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. They summoned Elara to the chamber, her delicate frame seeming even smaller under the weight of so many eyes. When she heard Jonah's words, her unseeing eyes filled with tears. "You would do this," she whispered. "For me." "Of course," Jonah replied. "But only if it's what you want." Elara hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached out toward him. He stepped forward, taking her hand gently in his. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she said softly. And with those words, the fate of two worlds began to shift. But the path ahead was far from simple. There were those who would stop at nothing to prevent their union, those who believed Elara's disability made her unfit to rule, and those who saw Jonah as a threat to their power. Together, they would face challenges that spanned light years, proving that love could defy the limits of culture, tradition, and even the stars themselves. The court buzzed with dissent, their outrage ricocheting through the crystalline halls of the palace. Despite the king and queen's silent deliberation, it was clear the Rthis were unprepared for such a brazen defiance of tradition. Their culture revered perfection, physical, mental, and spiritual. For an outsider, and a human at that, to request a bond with the untouched star was beyond comprehension. But Elara's voice cut through the clamor. Though soft, it carried an unmistakable resolve. "I may not be the daughter you dreamed of," she began, addressing her parents and the nobles alike. "But I am still your daughter. I have lived my life under the weight of your expectations, the burden of being seen as less than you hoped. Jonah sees me, not my flaws, not my blindness, but me. If you cannot grant us your blessing, then grant me at least the dignity of choosing my own path." The chamber fell silent, her words resonating like the hum of a tuning crystal. For a long moment, the king and queen exchanged glances, their expressions conflicted. Finally, the queen, whose composure rarely cracked, sighed deeply. "If this is truly what you desire, Elara," she said, her voice heavy with emotion, "then we will not stand in your way. But you must understand the consequences. The people may not accept this union." "I understand," Elara replied, her unseeing eyes fixed in the direction of her mother's voice. "But I am ready to face whatever comes." The king, his jaw tight, nodded solemnly. "Very well. Let it be known that we, the rulers of Rthis, accept this bond. Jonah Cade, you will take an oath of loyalty to our house and to Elara, and you will honor her as your equal." Jonah bowed deeply. "I will." The announcement sent shockwaves across Rthis. Some saw it as a bold move toward progress, a chance to break free from the rigid constraints of tradition. Others viewed it as a disgrace, an unforgivable blemish on the royal bloodline. Protests erupted in the streets of the capital, and even in the palace itself, alliances began to fracture. Amid the turmoil, Jonah and Elara grew closer. Though they came from different worlds, they discovered a profound connection in their shared understanding of isolation. Jonah taught her about Earth, describing sunsets over vast oceans, the taste of rain, and the laughter of children playing in the streets. In turn, Elara shared the stories of her ancestors, the songs of her people, and the quiet beauty she found in the vibrations of the world around her. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Jonah stopped beside the glimmer-bloom tree where they'd first met. He pulled a small, hand-carved pendant from his pocket, a simple design of intertwined lines that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. "It's not much," he said, his cheeks reddening, "but I made it for you. The lines represent the paths we've taken to find each other." Elara took the pendant, her fingers tracing its intricate design. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." But their happiness was short-lived. As the date of their bonding ceremony approached, whispers of dissent grew louder. A faction of nobles, led by the ambitious and calculating Lord Kale, began to conspire against the union. Kale, who had long sought to position himself closer to the throne, saw Elara's bond with a human as an opportunity to undermine the royal family. He spread rumors of Jonah's ulterior motives, claiming the human sought to exploit Rthis for his own gain. One night, as Jonah worked late in the palace's engineering wing, he was approached by Kale. The noble's silver robes shimmered in the low light, his expression a mask of feigned concern. "You must understand, Jonah," Kale began smoothly, "that your presence here is controversial. Many fear what this union represents, a weakening of our traditions, a dilution of our purity. I'm not here to dilute anything, Jonah replied evenly. I'm here because I care about Ilara. Perhaps, Kale said, his tone dripping with insincerity. But love is not enough to bridge the chasm between our worlds. If you truly care for her, you'll realize the best thing you can do is leave. Spare her the pain of becoming a pariah. Jonah stared at him, his jaw tightening. You're wrong. Ilara is stronger than you think, and together, we'll prove it. Kale's eyes hardened. So be it. But don't say I didn't warn you. In the days that followed, subtle but insidious obstacles began to appear. Supplies for the bonding ceremony were mysteriously delayed, key supporters of the royal family withdrew their backing, and tensions among the populace reached a boiling point. Through it all, Jonah and Ilara stood firm, their bond only growing stronger in the face of adversity. On the eve of the ceremony, Jonah found Ilara sitting in her quarters, her hands resting on her lap. She seemed lost in thought, her usually serene expression clouded with worry. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently, sitting beside her. She shook her head. "Not about you. Never about you. But I can't help wondering, am I being selfish? By choosing this path, am I putting you in danger? Am I dooming my people to more division?" Jonah took her hand, his touch grounding her. "You're not selfish, Ilara. You're brave. Brave enough to choose what's right for you, even when it's not easy. And as for danger, well, I've faced worse. I'm not going anywhere." She smiled faintly, leaning into him. "You always know what to say." The ceremony itself was both beautiful and bittersweet. Held in the heart of the palace under the grand crystalline dome, it was a spectacle of light and sound, the air shimmering with energy. Jonah and Ilara stood before the assembled guests, their hands intertwined as they exchanged vows of unity. Despite the protests outside the palace and the cold stares of some nobles, there were also those who cheered, their voices rising above the noise of dissent. But as the final words of the ceremony were spoken, the air suddenly grew heavy. A low hum reverberated through the hall, followed by a deafening crash. The dome above them cracked, shards of crystal raining down as an explosion tore through the far end of the chamber. Chaos erupted. Guards rushed to shield the royal family as smoke filled the air. Jonah pulled Ilara close, shielding her with his body as he scanned the room for the source of the attack. Through the haze, a figure emerged, Kale, flanked by a group of armed dissidents. His face twisted with fury, he pointed a blade at Jonah. "This ends now," Kale declared. "Rthis will not be tainted by your kind." Jonah instinctively stepped in front of Ilara, shielding her as Kale and his group of dissidents advanced. The guards around the royal family raised their weapons, but the intruders had come prepared, wielding energy-based weapons that crackled with deadly intent. "You don't have to do this, Kale," Jonah said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Whatever you think you're protecting, this isn't the way." Kale sneered. "Spoken like a true outsider. You don't understand what's at stake. Our traditions, our purity, our way of life. Everything you touch is corrupted." Ilara's voice rose, trembling but determined. "Enough, Kale. You speak of traditions as if they justify hatred and cruelty. But Rthis is more than your narrow vision. If we are truly as strong as you claim, then we must learn to grow, to adapt. This violence is not strength. It's fear." Kale's expression faltered for a moment, but his resolve hardened. "Your blindness has made you weak, princess. You cannot see the danger standing right beside you. And your hatred has made you blind, Kale," Ilara shot back. "You cannot see the good in others." Kale's jaw tightened, and he raised his blade. The tension in the room was suffocating, the hum of weapons charging filling the silence. Jonah's mind raced. He wasn't a warrior, he had no training in combat, no secret weapons. But he had his wits and his determination to protect Ilara. "Kale," Jonah said, his voice cutting through the noise, "if you're so convinced I'm the threat, then face me. Leave her out of this." The noble laughed bitterly. "You're hardly worth my time." "Then you've got nothing to lose," Jonah countered. "Or are you afraid a mere human might best you?" Cale's pride flared, and he motioned for his men to hold back. "Very well, human. Let's see what you're made of." Jonah stepped forward, his heart pounding. He glanced at Alara, who reached out as if to stop him, but he gave her a small, reassuring nod. The fight was brutal. Cale was faster and stronger, his blade moving with the precision of years of training. Jonah dodged clumsily, narrowly avoiding the arcs of energy that hissed through the air. His muscles ached, and every movement felt like a gamble. But he had one advantage. Cale underestimated him. As the noble lunged, Jonah ducked low, grabbing a loose shard of crystal from the shattered dome. With a desperate burst of strength, he swung upward, the shard colliding with Cale's blade. The impact sent a shockwave through Jonah's arm, but it disarmed Cale, sending the blade clattering to the floor. Jonah didn't hesitate. He tackled Cale, pinning him to the ground. "This ends here," he said through gritted teeth. "You've done enough damage." Cale struggled beneath him, but the guards moved in, subduing the remaining dissidents and taking Cale into custody. The room was a wreck, smoke and debris scattered everywhere, but the immediate danger had passed. Jonah turned to Alara, who was already moving toward him despite her blindness. He caught her in his arms, holding her tightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I am now," she whispered. "Jonah, you—" Before she could finish, the Queen's voice rang out. "Guards, secure the palace. Ensure the people are safe. And bring a medic for Mr. Cade." The king stepped forward, his stern expression softened by gratitude. "Jonah Cade," he said, "you have not only protected my daughter but also shown a courage few in this room possess. You have earned the right to stand by her side." Jonah nodded, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him. "Thank you, Your Majesty. But I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because she means everything to me." Alara squeezed his hand, her unseeing eyes glistening with tears. "And you mean everything to me." The aftermath of the attack was a turning point for Rthis. Cale and his conspirators were tried and exiled, their actions condemned as a betrayal of the planet's values. The people, shaken by the near tragedy, began to question the rigid traditions that had led them to the brink of destruction. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Jonah and Alara's bond became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of love and unity. Though challenges remained, they faced them together, their unwavering belief in each other lighting the way. As the stars glittered above the palace that night, Alara rested her head on Jonah's shoulder, her voice soft but resolute. "They'll write stories about this, you know. About the human who couldn't duck fast enough." Jonah joked, earning a laugh from her. "No," she said, smiling. "About the human who taught a princess, and an entire world, that love is the strongest force in the universe." Life on Rthis didn't settle easily after the bonding ceremony. The aftermath of Cale's coup rippled through the population, leaving divisions that even Jonah and Alara's symbolic union couldn't immediately bridge. As they stood together as a bonded pair, their every move was scrutinized, their motives questioned, and their love tested by circumstances beyond their control. Alara, once confined to the palace gardens, was determined to take a more active role in the governance of her people. For too long, she had been sheltered, dismissed as incapable of contributing. With Jonah at her side, she resolved to prove otherwise. One morning, as the sun cast golden light through the crystalline windows of the council chamber, Alara addressed the gathered nobles. "Our people have always prided themselves on their strength," she began, her voice carrying a steadiness born of conviction. "But strength is not inflexibility. Strength is the ability to adapt, to grow, and to embrace change. Jonah and I represent the possibility of a future where Rthis is not bound by its fears but guided by its hopes." The nobles murmured among themselves, some nodding in agreement while others wore skeptical expressions. One elder, Lady Sereth, stood. Her weathered face was etched with years of wisdom and tradition. "Princess Alara," she said, "you speak of change, but change is not always progress. How can you be certain this path will lead to a brighter future?" Alara smiled faintly. "Because I believe in the strength of our people to rise above their doubts. And because I believe that the love Jonah and I share is a testament to what we can achieve when we look beyond differences." Jonah stepped forward, his presence humble yet firm. "Lady Sereth, I can't pretend to know the intricacies of your culture. But I do know this. I didn't come here to change Rthis. I came here because I saw something extraordinary in Alara. And now, I see it in all of you. The potential to build something greater than any one tradition or belief." The council deliberated for hours, but Alara and Jonah's words left a mark. Over time, a coalition of progressive nobles began to emerge, working with the couple to implement reforms that would modernize Rthis without abandoning its heritage. Education initiatives were launched to teach the younger generation about unity and cooperation, and diplomatic ties with other planets were strengthened. Still, resistance lingered in the shadows. Not all Rishans were willing to accept the changes. Jonah and Alara received threats, their every action scrutinized by those waiting for them to falter. Yet, their bond only grew stronger. One night, as they walked hand in hand through the palace gardens, Jonah broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if I hadn't shown up?" Alara tilted her head thoughtfully. "I used to imagine my life as a series of locked doors. Every path I wanted to take was closed to me because of who I was, or who I wasn't. But when you came, Jonah, it was like you handed me the key." "And now?" he asked, his voice soft. "Now, I see that the doors were never locked," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "I just needed someone to show me how to open them." Their work wasn't confined to the palace. Jonah and Alara began traveling to the outer settlements of Rthis, places where dissent was strongest. These regions, often neglected by the central government, were home to hard-working but skeptical Rishans who saw the royal family as distant figures with little understanding of their struggles. In one such settlement, they were met with open hostility. The villagers refused to speak with them, turning their backs whenever Jonah or Alara approached. Undeterred, Jonah rolled up his sleeves and joined a group of workers repairing a malfunctioning energy harvester. Though they ignored him at first, his determination and skill gradually earned their grudging respect. Alara, meanwhile, spent time listening to the villagers' concerns. Though her blindness prevented her from seeing their faces, she heard the pain and frustration in their voices. She promised them that their struggles would not be ignored, and for the first time, they believed her. By the time Jonah finished repairing the harvester, the village had begun to soften. That evening, as they sat around a communal fire, the villagers shared their stories, their laughter mingling with the crackle of the flames. Jonah and Alara realized that bridging the divide wasn't just about grand speeches or reforms. It was about earning trust, one person at a time. Their journey wasn't without its challenges. On more than one occasion, they encountered remnants of Kale's faction, who sought to undermine their efforts. Ambushes, sabotage, and propaganda became a recurring threat. But each time, Jonah and Alara faced the danger together, their bond unshaken. One such confrontation occurred in a remote mining outpost. A group of Kale's loyalists had taken control of the facility, using its resources to fund their rebellion. Jonah and Alara, accompanied by a small contingent of loyal guards, negotiated with the rebels, hoping to avoid bloodshed. The rebel leader, a grim-faced man named Varek, sneered as he faced them. "You think you can just waltz in here with your pretty words and make us forget everything we've lost?" "I don't expect you to forget," Alara said calmly. "But I ask you to consider what you stand to gain. Rthis is changing, Varek. Clinging to the past will only bring more suffering." Varek's eyes narrowed. "Easy for you to say, sitting on your throne with your human pet." Jonah bristled, but Alara placed a calming hand on his arm. "I'm not here as a princess," she said. "I'm here as someone who believes in a future where no one is left behind. Let us help you." For a moment, it seemed as though Varek might relent. But one of his men, fueled by anger and mistrust, raised his weapon. The shot rang out, searing through the air toward Alara. Jonah moved without thinking, pulling her out of the way just in time. The guard subdued the attacker, but the incident left the room tense and fraught. Varek, shaken by the near tragedy, finally lowered his weapon. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish," he muttered. "Fine. We'll hear you out." In the days that followed, Jonah and Alara worked tirelessly to rebuild trust with the rebels, showing them that their grievances would be addressed. It was a painstaking process, but by the end, the mining outpost was reintegrated into the Rthian fold. The years that followed Jonah and Alara's tumultuous bonding were transformative, not just for the couple, but for Rthis itself. The planet had evolved from a society steeped in rigid traditions to one that embraced progress and inclusion, though not without its share of struggle. Jonah and Alara became symbols of unity across the galaxies. Their love story resonated with civilizations far and wide, sparking conversations about the importance of empathy and understanding. Ambassadors from distant worlds came to Rthis, inspired by their efforts, to learn how two people from vastly different cultures had bridged the divide. Jonah's presence, once a source of scandal, became a beacon of hope. Still, their work was far from easy. Rebellions flared intermittently, remnants of Kale's influence refusing to fade quietly into history. Jonah and Alara faced personal risks time and again, but their unwavering determination to heal their world carried them forward. With each crisis, they proved that unity could overcome even the deepest divisions. One of the defining moments came when Rthis hosted its first intergalactic summit under Jonah and Alara's leadership. Held in the grand crystalline hall where their bonding ceremony had taken place, the event welcomed representatives from dozens of planets, each bringing their own perspectives and challenges. The summit wasn't just a meeting of governments, it was a cultural exchange, a celebration of diversity, and a promise of collaboration. Jonah, standing beside Alara at the summit's opening ceremony, felt a surge of pride as she addressed the gathered delegates. "Years ago, I believed that my blindness was a barrier," Alara began, her voice resonating with calm strength. "I thought that because I could not see the stars, I could never truly understand their beauty. But Jonah taught me something profound. The heart sees what the eyes cannot. In the same way, our differences are not barriers. They are bridges, waiting to be crossed." The room erupted in applause, the sound reverberating through the hall like the hum of cosmic energy. Jonah, smiling at her side, leaned over and whispered, "You're amazing, you know that?" Alara tilted her head toward him, her lips curving into a soft smile. "I had a good teacher." As the summit progressed, alliances were forged that would shape the course of galactic history. Rthis became a hub of innovation and diplomacy, its influence extending far beyond its crystalline cities. The planet's people, once resistant to change, began to take pride in their role as leaders in a new era of unity. For Jonah and Alara, life settled into a rhythm of purpose and quiet joy. Their love deepened with each passing year, their bond unshaken by the challenges they faced. They continued their travels, their efforts to heal the fractures in their world extending to the farthest reaches of Rthis. In time, the dissenters grew fewer, their voices quieter, as the fruits of progress became impossible to deny. One evening, as they stood together on a balcony overlooking the capital, Jonah wrapped an arm around Alara's shoulders. The city below shimmered with the light of 1,000 glimmer-bloom trees, their glow a testament to the resilience of Rthis and its people. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Jonah asked, his voice tinged with wonder. Alara leaned into him, her unseeing eyes turned toward the horizon. "Every day," she replied. "And I know we still have far to go. But as long as we walk this path together, I believe we can face anything." Jonah kissed her temple, his voice soft but firm. "Always together." As the stars began to appear above them, their light weaving patterns across the endless sky, Jonah and Alara stood as they had always been, partners, equals, and a living testament to the power of love to transcend the boundaries of worlds. In the infinite tapestry of the cosmos, their story became a legend, a tale of two souls who dared to defy expectations, who turned the untouchable into the unforgettable, and who proved that even in the vast expanse of the universe, the smallest acts of love could ripple across galaxies and change everything. The story of Jonah and Alara carries a profound moral about the transformative power of love, acceptance, and unity. It teaches us that true strength lies not in clinging to rigid traditions but in embracing change and diversity. By seeing beyond superficial differences, we unlock the potential for profound connections that enrich and empower us. The courage to stand against prejudice, even in the face of overwhelming odds, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Progress is born from empathy, understanding, and the willingness to listen to voices often silenced. When we choose compassion over fear, we pave the way for a brighter, more inclusive future. Jonah and Alara remind us that no barrier is insurmountable when hearts are open. Their story inspires us to seek unity in a divided world and to celebrate the beauty of our shared humanity. Love, in all its forms, is the strongest force in the universe. It bridges worlds, heals wounds, and shows us what it truly means to be alive.